very special episode of Listen to the Future, a podcast where we explore the incredible work being done to improve the lives of children around the world. This effort is to hear the voice of the future through young people, enabling the right to voice for every child. I'm Shweta Michelle, and today we are celebrating 35 years of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Joining me is Christian Skook, the country representative of UNICEF Sri Lanka, and two very special guests, Ravit and Yashodhara. Hi. Thank you for being here with us today. So, before we begin, I would like Ravit and Yashodhara to introduce yourselves to the audience.
Hi, my name is Ravit. I turned 18 recently.
Hi, my name is Yashodhara. I'm 16 and I'm from Tisamahara.
Well, that was a lovely introduction. So, let's get started with our podcast. So, Christian, what is CRC and why do you think it is important for children and the community?
So the CRC stands for the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It's for UNICEF. It's the most important document in the world. This is something that was agreed upon by pretty much all countries of the world. They've signed off on this and said these are the rights that all children have everywhere. This concerns health, nutrition, education, the right to a family, the right to leisure, to play and what have you. And this was done in 1989. Sri Lanka signed up and ratified this just a couple of years later. And it is the most ratified international human rights instrument in the world. So it's extremely important. And it's the reference for everything that UNICEF does in any country, because it outlines every right that the children have. One thing that is very important, perhaps to mention, is that apart from the list of rights that children have, there are some principles, and the most important principle, I would say, is the best interest of the child. That means that in every situation when there is an issue or an action that concerns or involves children somehow, we need to always think of the best interest of the child or the children. So that's a guiding principle that should concern us every time we talk about or think about what we're doing with or for children. Another principle that is important is participation. That's clearly specified in the convention, and it means that children should always be consulted. They should be listened to. Their opinion should be taken into account when we're doing something that concerns children. So indeed, it's very important for everything that we do, and something that we support every country around the world in implementing.
So, why is Sri Lanka important in this context?
Sri Lanka is important as every other country is important in a sense. They ratified the convention very early on, and so it's important that they're supported in implementing it for every child in Sri Lanka. But also Sri Lanka has done quite well in many areas in terms of respecting the right to health and right to education, for example. So Sri Lanka becomes a model many times for other countries to follow. And UNICEF is present around the world, and we use experiences for one country to inspire others. And Sri Lanka can be an inspiration, and has been an inspiration for many other countries in trying to support the child rights and guaranteeing these rights for every child.
Thank you, Christian. I would like to direct my next question to Ravit. So, Ravit, what are the challenges you think children like you in Sri Lanka face?
Well, I think that a huge problem would be with regards to mental health, especially from student bullying. When other kids in Sri Lanka have an ideology that bullying is a really normal aspect, is very problematic, and I think is something that needs to change going forward.
I would like to direct the same question to Yashodhara.
So I think one of the biggest challenges is obtaining quality education, and that could be lack of resources. So as someone from rural areas, I have faced many lack of resources when it comes to education. So it could be textbook, it could be infrastructure, it could be even technological gaps, right? And one of the things I noticed was overcrowded classrooms, especially in like government schools. And lack of professional development developers was also an issue when I was learning there. So yeah, I think obtaining quality education in Sri Lanka, especially in rural areas, is a challenge that students actively face.
All right. Thank you, Yashodhara and Ravit, for sharing those experiences and the challenges that you face as children in Sri Lanka. I would like to ask Christian, what are the biggest challenges UNICEF faces in protecting children's rights?
Uh, well, uh, maybe two parts to this question or to this response. The first one is there are many children, they are diverse. So, respecting the right of every child everywhere, girl or boy, young or older, is a bit of a challenge because it needs to be individual on many occasions. But so to get to every corner and making sure that everybody has equal opportunities is always is a challenge. And then when on top of it there might be a shock to the system, meaning a crisis or an emergency, it becomes even more difficult to reach, to understand what children need in those particular circumstances, and make sure that the response is correct. So those are overall just that the childhood and children are very rich in diversity, but it makes it a little bit harder. The other part that I wanted to mention is more the issue of child rights, that children have rights. So for adults to understand that we're not helping children because they are cute and those poor little children who are hungry or whatever they may be. No, they have a right. It's sort of a legal right to protection, to nutrition, to health, to education. So we need to respect that. And they are full citizens with all these rights, just like adults have rights. Um, so to get the whole society to understand and prioritize children that way, that is a challenge in Sri Lanka and everywhere else.
Thank you, Christian. That was a very powerful and important message to our audience and everyone who's listening. So let's direct our attention towards emergency situations in Sri Lanka. So recently, we faced a lot of difficulties as a nation, and it was, for example, it's the economic crisis and COVID-19. So I would like to know how was these challenges or the emergency situations were to Ravit and Yashodhara. Can you please give your experience about this?
Well, to start off, COVID 19 was a little challenging, especially with educational. Personally, I prefer physical education over online education. And I prefer hands on learning, interacting with my friends. But due to obvious safety concerns of the coronavirus, we couldn't do any of that. I also felt that resources and like going to the store, getting certain items was a little difficult because we didn't have a lot of stores that were open. We couldn't interact very often. We couldn't go outside a lot. And on that note, I'd also like to talk about the fear of uncertainty, especially whenever my parents went outside or my parents went to work. With the little ample time that we had to go outside, um, with regards to whether they'd come back with the virus or whether they'd contract the virus, it was a scary time, especially because it was an invisible threat, an intangible threat that was scary to everyone per se.
So I agree, it was hard not seeing my friends and family as the physical learning suddenly shifted to online learning. And one thing I noticed in my area was financial hardship. So, and one more thing I noticed was like lack of human connection. So like I couldn't go out. My parents were the only ones who could go out, and they would just come back with lack of resources, right? So they couldn't obtain everything we need from the store. So I think yeah, COVID was a really tough time for me.
Well, yes. So people were very disconnected and isolated, and they were having a lot of difficulties during this period. I would also like to ask from both of you, what were your experience with regarding to the economic crisis?
So what I really found was difficult was seeing a lot of other people's struggles around me, and seeing how they fared, especially with certain people that are doing certain jobs also had a lot of lack of access, because interaction is something so important to the economy, and it's basically an unknown foundation to it. um, but because not everything can transition to online, but throughout all of that, I think it was that adaptation to another new situation that was really scary for not only me, but I could see it in my parents as well, in everyone around the world, even anyone. That adaptation was a little scary.
Once again, I agree. Even in my area, it was almost impossible to obtain even the necessities, and food crisis, inflammation, they all affected everyone in the country, right? So, financial hardships due to loss of jobs. As in rural areas, there are people who earn daily by working, right? So, they had to stay at home and they lost their job. So, this really affected people in that area. Especially, I've seen even my friends, family surrounding me struggling financially because of this. So I think it was a hard time for the economy of the country.
Yes, absolutely. So everyone in the country was facing a lot of difficulties, and it was to adapt to a new normal. So, yeah, I agree with both of you. It was really a very difficult situation. So, Christian, how does UNICEF respond when there is an emergency or crisis in Sri Lanka?
And one thing is about being prepared. Actually, so we need to be prepared for emergencies. So we do prepare in terms of what supplies we may need, what partners we work with, and what the different scenarios are in terms if there are floods or droughts or what have you. The economic crisis was a bit different. Actually, it was a bit of an unusual situation. But what we do is we step up. We usually mobilize more people from the outside to support. We mobilize funds from abroad more than in our regular work. But there's usually more attention and therefore more interest in supporting other countries when there is an emergency. So we do usually mobilize more resources. We tend to provide a bit more supplies. We have nutritional supplies or educational supplies to make sure that education or health continues. In the economic crisis, we also had a very large program in Sri Lanka, one of the biggest in the world, actually, of one of the biggest cash transfer programs. So this was to provide cash support to over 100,000 families, 115,000 children, I think, were involved, to provide a bit of relief. And what we've heard from our dear guests here, that it was hard for families to make ends meet, and so we were able to provide some cash like that. So that we still do. We work with the government and make sure that the systems are responding, and we don't do it in parallel, but we step up and try to be as quick and agile as possible.
Thank you, Christian. Um, Ravit and Yashudhara, do you have any questions that you would like to ask Christian and clarify? Please go ahead.
So, Christian, as someone who has been working with children for a long period of time, you must have had many for unforgettable memories, right? So, what's the best one so far?
It's difficult to pick one, no? But so I've worked in many different countries. I think what really excites me and inspires me is when I see children engaged and smiling and happy. Situations where we've been able to strengthen education or respond to an emergency and ensure that they can be in a school of some sort, or get to play in a safe space. Those are some very, very memorable moments. There's some very difficult ones as well. Children being having been abused and victims of violence, for example. Those are very strong experiences, and but it also gives a which I say it inspires me to work harder because you really see the need of children. But one other um, very good moment was in Guatemala, where we had a number of adolescent, there were actually 5 adolescent networks who came together and basically defined UNICEF's program for adolescents in the country. So they said what they wanted, what the adolescents needed, their priority areas. One was including getting their voice heard. So UNICEF's program was basically designed by them, and then we worked to implement this and ensured including their space and voice with regular meetings with government, including the vice president, to have discussions around adolescents' priorities. So that was a fantastic program designed and largely implemented by them themselves.
Right. So thank you, Christian, for that lovely um, talk about getting a voice across and how children can change a lot. So, on that note of how other people can bring calls to action and change a lot, Christian, on a very personal note, what do you think us as the audience, as the people in this nation could do, or as somewhat of a call to action could do with regards to child rights?
Well, the first thing is to learn about child rights, for children to understand that they have rights, for adults to understand that children have rights, because this is a very powerful concept, if you want, that it's not just supporting and helping children because they are small and not fully sometimes capable of running their lives. No, they are full bodied citizens that have rights, and we need to respect that as adults and give them the space and voice. So to learn about child rights, to understand what it really means, is probably the most important. And as children, do get involved in shaping your own lives. Raise your voice constructively, whether at home or in school, in your communities. Get together with others and advocate for what you need, what you want, and that the adult world respects your rights.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Ravid, for asking that question. It was really a very good question to ask from Christian. And I would like to ask Christian, um, what hopes do you have for the future of children in Sri Lanka? And what advice would you give to children who want to make a difference?
Maybe to start with the last one and building a bit on what I said, I think it's about learning about child rights, what your rights are, and voicing those rights, and getting together with other children, wherever that may be, and make your voice heard, and insist on this in a constructive manner, to looking for solutions. My hope, we're always optimistic and hopeful in UNICEF, and we envision a world where every child has an opportunity to fulfill his or her rights in every respect, and to live a healthy life, getting opportunities for an education and pursuing passions, and the wishes in the life. It doesn't mean every dream comes true, but it's important for every child to be able to dream and try to pursue those dreams. So that's what we want every girl and boy in Sri Lanka to be able to do.
Thank you, Christian. So, I would like to direct my final questions to Ravit and Yashodhara. So, how do you think adults, the government, and society can create a better future for children like you?
On a final note, I think that it's important for adults to listen to children and take their opinions seriously. And society should work together to create a safe and supportive environment for children as well. I think that these are very important going forward.
So I agree. It's also important to raise awareness about child rights, and as Christian said, ensure most of them have resources that they need to thrive, and ensure that they have a right to live in a safe environment, that they have access to education, healthcare, and implement fostering and supporting environment like more programs and more campaigns. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Yashodhara and Ravit. So, I would like to ask Christian for a final key message that you would like to give to our audience.
So, in terms of a final key message, first of all, I think it's very important that while many people positively talk about children as important because they are our future, I would challenge that and say they are our present and our future. So, the respect for their rights need to happen today. The child rights cannot wait, and need to be respected today. Children are the foundation on which any society is built. So by placing their rights and their interests first, we will create a better society, a healthier society, better educated society, more resilient society, and it will contribute to Sri Lanka's national development.
Thank you very much, Christian. So, yeah, it is very important to raise awareness about children's right and ensure that all children have access to the resources they need to thrive. And I hope that this podcast contributed to bridge that gap of lack of awareness of children's right in the community. So, this is all to hear from the children and to listen to what they have to say. And this podcast covered what is CRC, challenges that the children in Sri Lanka face, and we talked about the emergency situations like the COVID-19 economic crisis and everything about children's rights. So, thank you very much for joining with us today. Thank you, Ravit and Yashodhara. And very special thanks to Christian, our country representative of UNICEF Sri Lanka. So, thank you to our listeners for tuning in. And with that being said, happy
Children's Day.